Every week, powerful interests try to write the rules. Meet lawyer Genie Harrison, who refused to let that happen. Welcome to This Week in Law at the offices of Johnson & Johnson in Beverly Hills, California, where we talk about interesting legal issues and topics that affect all of us in our community. We're very lucky to have today Genie Harrison of the law offices of Genie Harrison in Calabasas, California. Genie is one of the top lawyers in Southern California, if not the United States. We have something called super lawyer, where all the lawyers in the jurisdiction vote on the best lawyers in the community. And Genie has regularly been in the top 10 of all lawyers in Southern California. Thank you so much for coming. Genie, what is your area of practice?
Neville, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm an employment lawyer on behalf of plaintiffs and a sex abuse lawyer. So I really refer to myself as a women's rights lawyer. And so I think that sometimes that's a little controversial to say something like, I'm a women's rights lawyer, but I'm a women's rights lawyer.
Well, do you ever represent men?
Yes, sometimes I do have men who come into the firm and hire us. But I tell you, the vast majority of my clients are women, and that's selected by the client.
How many lawyers are at your firm?
4.
And I first became aware of you, I believe it was the case involving the fire department. What was that case?
Yeah, that was a while ago. So that was initially, I was representing Tenny Pierce, who is an African-American firefighter who was fed dog food by his entire crew, and his supervisors, the captains, were in on it. It was an incredibly humiliating experience. They, instead of making his spaghetti, because the crew, makes meals for one another, and instead of making his spaghetti with ground beef, they made it with dog food. And he was the only black man in the station on that crew. And they were all in on it in a small kitchen, wrapped it up specially for him and told him, Tenny, we've got your plate right over there. And they all watched as he went and picked up his plate and sat down and ate the dog food that they arranged for him and fed him. And he said, this tastes horrible. And they all just started laughing at him. And he finally figured out pretty quickly what they had done. And he felt an absolute betrayal. He was humiliated and horrified, and he took some time off and then said, I think the only reason they did this to me was because I'm black, and which he has a right to say. And he then went out on a little bit of a longer leave, and it became them versus him, because he stood up for himself and said, I think this was wrong. You did this to me because I'm black. And then when he tried to come back to work, he began being retaliated against very severely. He was in a flashover training where fire gets shot all in basically a room over the top of him, and his PPEs, personal protective equipment, had been messed with. Oh. And so this is a matter of life and death, and he was an absolutely heroic, popular, lauded individual, as big as the door here. I mean, a huge man and fully capable. And because of the betrayal of trust and the humiliation and the ostracism, the them versus him, and him just standing up for his rights, he lost that career. And he couldn't go back to work. He tried 3 times, and he couldn't go back to work. So he went to many lawyers around town, and no one would take his case. And then when I met him and I saw how imposing he is as an individual, and he described the incident to me, I said, there is no way this happens unless everybody is part of this dynamic and story. And unless the supervisors, the captains, know that they can get away with it. And so that's how I figured out there was a systemic problem in the fire department. It's always a top-down situation when something that egregious occurs.
Was this just one station?
That was at one station. But then I represented other minority and women firefighters because I went and researched and found out the fact that there were numerous race and gender issues and sexual orientation issues that were happening all over the Los Angeles City Fire Department. So I put them on a map, I charted them, and I figured out, are there common denominators, common people involved? I learned the structure, the hierarchy within the fire department, and then I figured out what the failures in the policies and the procedures were. And so then I brought a systemic case and a series of cases. And I engaged the NAACP, the National Organization for Women, in an entire campaign in terms of publicity, the civil rights movement, and then also trying cases so that there were going to be large verdicts coming, so that there was public pressure from every angle.
So tell us about
the fire department.
Tell us about the verdicts.
So there were verdicts and settlements. And there was a verdict on behalf of a Black lesbian firefighter. And that at the time was $6.8 million, which was, 20 years ago. And that was a very large verdict. And the Teddy Pierce case actually initially settled. And that was vetoed by Mayor Villaraigosa at the time, who is now running for governor, right? And he vetoed the settlement because he thought it would be, he observed societally that it was unpopular because there was this Ken and John show and people sent dog food into the city hall and to the mayor's office and all this kind of stuff. It was a real kerfuffle.
Okay, great. And tell us about what's your what do you consider it the fire department to be now? Is it better?
Well, interestingly, I am now representing the former fire chief, Kristen Crowley, against Karen Bass and the city of Los Angeles as a result of the retaliation and defamation that Mayor Bass subjected Chief Crowley to. And so do I think that it's better? Well, it's different from, the fire department is different from the way it was 20 years ago in certain respects. We also got, 20 years ago, we got a finding via the EEOC about systemic harassment, discrimination, retaliation against women and minorities, and there were forced changes involving the government, the EEOC as well. That's something else that I did then. So there's a lot that has changed over time. You see what I'm saying? But there continue to be the city of Los Angeles and the issues within the bureaucracy here remain ubiquitous.
Have you been handling any police cases?
No, I haven't really been handling police cases.
Okay, I want to talk about Riot Games. You've been in the news about that. That was a big class action.
Yeah.
Tell us.
Riot Games was an equal pay, gender and sexual harassment class action case. It was originally handled by another lawyer who negotiated a $10 million settlement. And one would think, okay, $10 million, that's a lot, that's great. But in fact, the women who were being represented by this lawyer felt that that was not sufficient. And they also felt, Neville, that they were not being heard by their lawyer. They reached out to me and I said, it's not possible for me to tell you just on an initial phone call whether I think $10 million is a fair settlement or not. But what I will do is I will listen to you and we will work together and we will figure out whether this is the right number or not. And I will tell you. And so I took the case, and then in just under 2 years, I multiplied that by 10 and achieved a $100 million settlement with massive structural reform and changes
All right. So
for
what
the
were
women of
what are,
Riot Games.
what are the facts? What were they complaining about?
Oh, well, they were severely underpaid. They were in comparison to the men who did substantially similar work, okay? They were also not generally granted equity, whereas the men in essentially the corollary positions, the same positions, were granted equity. And these are massive amounts of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars going on to millions of dollars over these women's lifetime and their work lives. And that negatively affects their abilities to, generate wealth, obviously be able to buy a place, have a mortgage, support their families, save for retirement. They also were complaining about systemic harassment, sexual harassment, and gender discrimination from the top down. There were crazy things happening by the founders of the company. The CFO at one point got in an elevator with a couple of women and another guy and basically said, don't be surprised if, and this is generally, right? Don't be surprised if so-and-so starts humping you. This is how we figure out whether you're going to fit in, right? I mean, all the way to this kind of thing. And there were many, many, many specifics and anecdotes that came both from coworker level up to the top and eventually to HR once they developed HR, et cetera. There were complaints about the failure to pay equitably. It was just, this was a conscious choice over and over and over again by the leaders in business to continue conducting business that way.
Didn't you have some problems with the government involvement in the case? Tell us.
Yes. So what was called the Department of Fair Employment and Housing at the time, since changed its name to the California Civil Rights Department, came in and was attempting to intervene in the case at the time of that original $10 million settlement. So I had the bright idea, because I had worked with the EEOC before in the fire department cases, I had the bright idea of let me actually collaborate with the DFVH at the time, as it was called, and usher them in and work together, because that way we can leverage a much better outcome, right, for the women. And that's what matters, is what are we going to be able to achieve for the client? And so, be careful what you wish for, right? Because they had the people who were making the litigation decisions at the DFVH at the time had their own ideas about how to handle things as well. And it was a long and arduous experience in that relationship.
What did you have to do to multiply it 10 times? What was
Discovery, actually get data, hire experts. Those are things that hadn't been done at the level at which I did them.
How much money did you have to put out, your team?
Oh, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. Yeah.
What was this? The whole, as I understand it, the whole gaming community is very difficult for women overall, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And women really get targeted, whether they're players or, engineers or both. They usually are both, but they get targeted with real misogynistic rhetoric and, objectification and sexualization and all of these things.
Anyway, you were able to effectuate a good settlement.
It was a great settlement.
And women are getting what they want.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I want to talk about...
And Neville, here, importantly, I also want to say they received a tremendous amount of money. The range of the awards for those individual employees, those women, has been life-changing.
How many women did you represent?
It was a couple thousand.
Oh my gosh. Okay, one other One other area is Harvey Weinstein.
Yeah.
I know you had some involvement in his cases. Tell us about that story.
So I represented one of Harvey Weinstein's former personal assistants. And here was another one of those instances where someone called me and she was telling me the story of what happened to her. She had spoken to a number of male lawyers, and all of whom told her that she had no case. And so I listened to her, and I could feel the trauma over the phone. I know that. I understand that. I have lived that. And so I knew what had happened to her instinctively from how she was communicating with me. And there was actually at that point a very limited amount of detail that she was capable of sharing. So I flew up to meet her the next day, and she was in Northern California. And it was years before she was actually able to tell me most of what he did to her. But he's a true super predator. I represented 5 other women as well, who were actresses, writers, etc., against him. And the stories that I heard and the patterns of his conduct are, truly
Do you have to file any cases or?
Oh yeah, I filed in New York against him, the Weinstein Company, and my client was one of the sources for Jodi Kantor and Megan Twohey at the New York Times, and then I also became someone who helped them with content and information. There was a real web of people who finally were coming forward and helping the journalists tell the story of what had really happened.
All right, we got very little time left, but talk about Uber and the major corporations and what they're trying to do to crush lawyers.
Okay, so Uber has an initiative that they are getting on the ballot this year, and what they are trying to do is make it so that victims of accidents and victims of sexual assault and all the things really that happen in Ubers, although this is directed at products and injury accidents. But they're trying to make it so that those people really can't get lawyers to represent them. And they're doing that by trying to limit the amount of money that will be available for the accident victims to be able to utilize for their own injuries and that kind of thing. And so it is Uber, yet again, just trying to completely buy a change in society that will benefit it and enrich it. It's all about profits over people.
How about that? Listen, everybody, this is another wonderful episode of This Week in Law. I can't tell you how much I appreciate having superstar Genie Harrison here. I want you all to watch for This Week in Law wherever you can find it on the internet. And thanks so much for watching. See you next time.